Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's online session with Mufti Faraz, question and answer session. We find these sessions to be quite interesting and quite popular with people because it's your opportunity to ask someone of knowledge, mashallah, some pertinent questions from your side. Pensions, we know, affects most people in this country because especially since the advent of the compulsory workplace schemes now, where wherever you're working, whether it's a small or large firm, whether it's a profit-making venture or not-for-profit making organization, you are compelled, or employees are compelled to provide a pension scheme for their employees because we have a crisis really in terms of catering for our aged population now and in the future. So this is something that's very high on the agenda, and most people are therefore affected by pensions. So we get a lot of inquiries, a lot of questions, and around pensions. So this is your opportunity to ask about halal pension. So please fire away. We do have some questions that have already been given to us. So I think we'll see if there's anything coming from the audience. Let us know. Otherwise, I do have some questions which have already been posed. So I can come in with those. Okay. Okay. So I have a few that have already been come through, Mufti Faraz. Do you want me to start with those?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I think we covered this last time, but the first question is a defined benefit scheme halal?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Yeah, so we did discuss, we had an entire session on defined benefit schemes. So anybody who wants to watch the longer, more detailed response is welcome to go on Simply Ethical's YouTube channel. I'm sure it should be there somewhere.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
But just to summarize that kind of presentation and respond to the questioner, defined benefit schemes, in my view, in the view of a number of scholars as well, hold the same view that it is halal, right? It's simply a form of deferred salary. That's all it is. What the employer does in the back end, how they generate the excess or the extra money, and how, wherever they do, that's their responsibility. That's between them and themselves and whoever else. But between you and Allah, and between you and your employer, it's just an ijara, and therefore it's a deferred income for yourself. It'll be lawful as long as your job is halal, right? That's the key thing. And what you have to consider is your job. As long as your job is halal, then alhamdulillah, any income you receive in lieu of that will be halal, right? But if your job is not halal, then of course you need to change your job, and your income, you should not benefit from such income. So that's with regards to defined benefit schemes.
Yeah. And then the opposite of that, or the other type of pension scheme, which is a defined contribution scheme, the question is that halal?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because defined contribution schemes are, they vary. They come in various forms. In essence, it's just an investment, a long-term investment. And as we know with investments, especially when it's a fund, a portfolio is there, which comprises of several different assets. And asset classes are there's so many different types of asset classes. Each asset has a different risk return profile, the kind of volatility, its relationships with other asset classes, whether it's inverse, all depends on the type of asset that you're dealing with. So these types of funds are always composed of several assets, and that's to diversify and ensure there's gain or long term. So when it comes to certain pension funds and certain portfolios, they are made up of several non-compliant assets. For example, bonds is a typical one, which is either gilt or fixed income product. So these are not Sharia compliant. So whenever you're dealing with a pension, we have to first understand what are the underlying assets of that pension fund, especially a defined contribution scheme, because you're now investing in that. You have the power, the autonomy to switch. Right? You can switch through your employer or your HR, and you can say, I want to invest somewhere else. And therefore, you have much more responsibility from an Islamic perspective to ensure that the underlying fund that you're investing in is Sharia compliant. Of course, The easy way to do that is by simply seeing the name. Usually it'll say it's Islamic fund whatever, or a Sharia fund whatever, right? It's very visible from the name that it's a Sharia compliant fund. But just to highlight further what's going on under the bonnet, really, it's that the asset classes are held within the fund are Sharia compliant. So a Sharia compliant pension fund will not have bonds, right? It will not have great exposure to money market securities or other assets and alternative trading strategies such as hedge funds and commodities. Generally, when these are part of the mix of any fund, especially hedge funds, majority of the trades are using derivatives like swaps and these types of things. Or they're investing in private equity. And again, we don't have the full kind of transparency and disclosures to understand the Sharia compliance of that investment. When it comes to commodities, these funds are generally investing in, again, through CFDs and other such kind of instruments to gain exposure to commodity prices. And again, there's no real investment in the commodity itself. Likewise, there'll be other assets there which are also problematic. Cash shows up on the fact sheet. Cash generally is held in savings accounts or the short-term fixed deposits where you're accruing interest. So that's also problematic. So these are generally the asset classes found in non-compliant pension funds. And therefore, if you want to see whether a defined contribution scheme is halal, it's not as simple as yes or no. A defined contribution scheme can be halal. It has a potential to be halal, but you have to make sure the fund that you're investing in is Sharia compliant. The easiest way to do that is just simply see the name. Generally, if not all, then the Islamic funds or Islamic pension funds will have an Islamic name to it, or it'll say Sharia or something of that nature to make you understand that it is Sharia compliant. And just to mention one point here, there's a difference between ethical and Sharia, right? It's very important. There's a slight distinction between the two. Not everything which is ethical is Sharia compliant, right? Because the ethical screening criteria are not values, well, they're not Sharia based. So the values in Sharia are more focused and there's a framework, whereas the ethical framework is somewhat different. And though ethical can change, what's ethical today can be different to what's ethical after 100 years, or what was ethical 100 years ago. So that's not an automatic kind of light for Sharia compliance. It's very important just to take note of that. And Faisal, I mean, even from your experience, you've probably seen so many of these kind of overlaps, but yet distinctions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to come in really, in the sense that I'm echoing here. I'm not quite sure why. Can you hear an echo when I'm speaking?
Very slightly.
Very slightly. Okay. No, we basically deal with pensions. That's our mainstay of business. And workplace pensions, I think, just backing up what you said, what you find in the majority of workplace pensions is most employers are aware, especially the bigger ones, that they need to offer a Sharia compliant option within what they do and what they offer. In fact, the government scheme, the Nest scheme, has a Sharia compliant option. So that's good news that Muslims are being recognized and an option is usually provided for them. I think the other big thing to say is that almost in all cases that we've come across, the employer will offer one Sharia compliant fund, usually the HSBC Amana Global Tracker Fund, Global Equity Tracker Fund. And that's the one fund that they tend to offer. I think HSBC's got in there with that because of its name and track record and its standing. And, you know, Sharia funds haven't been that popular or that much in number in the last number of years. So that fund tends to work its way into the likes of Aviva and other bigger players who offer that. And that's, while that's really good, the downside of that is just one fund. It's an equity fund, so you don't get that diversification that Mufti Faraz alluded to, that you have different asset classes in a pension fund. And I suppose this is where the likes of Simply Ethical come in to the picture more, in that we can offer people the opportunity to set up a pension, which is then invested in a sort of a variety and diversified pool of assets, which are Sharia compliant, which is in terms of the quality of the portfolio you're investing in is higher because it's more diversified. But there's many things to discuss with workplace pensions. While you're working for a workplace, an employer, it's very hard to leave that scheme, and usually benefits associated with their scheme is such that you put in contributions, the employer puts in contributions. But what you can do is you can make use of whatever scheme, Sharia options are available while you're employed. Once you leave an employer, then you have the ability to move schemes to where you want them to. And that's what we do all the time for people, is that as they accumulate schemes from working in different places, once they've left an employer, they have the ability to move that pension pot to somewhere else. And that's where the likes of Simply Ethical can help you, because you can consolidate your previous pension schemes into one new scheme and invest it all in a Sharia compliant pool of assets. So yeah, that's the main issue there. Moving on then to other questions. In a similar vein, I think a lot of them are focused on, I've got two questions here. What makes a pension Sharia compliant? What types of assets are found in a Sharia compliant pension fund? Do you want to just elaborate on that, Mufti Faraz?
Yeah, sure. So what makes a pension Sharia compliant is several things. Number one is that the fund itself has gone through a rigorous screening, right? It ensures that the fund is not investing in anything which is considered to be a vice or a non-virtuous sector, right? So Islam has these ideals, Islam has these principles, where Islam has come to support and better society, the economy, the markets, the people, right? That's the honestly, when you try to drill it down and you want to put it into one sentence, Islam is there for that. Islam is just to make everyone better, everything better. And anything which is seen, or which Allah has all in knowledge, right? Allah knows that certain things are detrimental for us. And therefore, Allah does not want us to be involved in those things. Neither does He want our funds and the monies to be circulating in those things. Because if either we're supporting it or our money is working, right? Factors of production. What are factors of production, right? You got human, you got capital, labor, land, enterprise, these things. So Allah doesn't want any of these factors of production circulating within vice. Why? Because that is a factor of production. More vice will be created. And so we have a very clear guidance from Allah that money should be circulating in only areas of virtue and not of vice. So any fund will screen out areas of vice, such as alcohol, tobacco, gambling, casinos, conventional finance, interest. All these things will be taken out altogether. Then further, the fund manager will try and reduce exposure to interest, riba, in terms of payables, receivables, impure income, as much as possible, right? As much as possible, and there's thresholds there. Further, as a fund, because it's a fund, it's not a direct stock or share. The fund manager will be restricted when it comes to leveraging, borrowing. He'll have to ensure any guarantees which are taken are Sharia compliant. Derivatives usage will also be barred by the Sharia board. So these are all types of governance and investment policies which will be in place, which the Sharia board will be there. And of course, it's very important and in many places mandatory to have a Sharia board overseeing the operations to ensure everything is working properly. So this is what makes a fund Sharia compliant, the ongoing governance, ongoing review, and the investment policies in place. To add to that, why is this so important? It's not that just the outcome has to be Sharia compliant, or the outcome, as long as there's less interest or less impure income, it's fine. That's not enough. It's the process which is the key, right? And why do I say that? We have several examples in the hadith, right, where the outcome can potentially be fine, but the Messenger of Allah, he specifically prohibited the process. For example, you have things like the munabadha sale, right, or the mulamasa sale. Right? Anybody who studied Islamic finance at a very introductory level will have come across these terms. These are types of sales which would take place in the pre-Islamic times, right, where a person would throw a stone, and whatever the stone hits, will be the subject matter of the sale. Now, the Messenger of Allah, he didn't say or he didn't advise that as long as you receive something in the end, the transaction is fine. Because anyone will tell you the problem here is gharar, uncertainty in you gaining anything. But nobody said as long as there's no gharar in the end, meaning both parties gain something, the transaction is fine. No, because it was done in this particular manner, regardless of the outcome, you have to redo it and cancel the transaction. So it's very important. The process is key, right, from a Sharia perspective. And the process is captured in the contracts, the investment policies, the guidelines, and that's what the Sharia board comes in to see, and the Sharia scholars, because this must be done properly. So it's not left to some kind of chance or uncertainty that maybe this month we'll hit the screening criteria, maybe next month we won't, and we'll just purify our income. No, the process must be done properly to reduce exposure as much as possible to unlawful things. So this is what makes a pension Sharia compliant. Process is key. There's due diligence there. There's good Sharia governance there. There's audits taking place, and there's exposure to unlawful income and exposure to unlawful assets is reduced altogether, unlike conventional funds.
Thank you very much for that. So again, echoing is coming, but never mind. What is the importance of having a halal pension? Now, I think we've been answering that. I mean, the bottom line is that this is an asset which you're building up to support you in your retirement. It forms part of your wealth. It forms part of your livelihood. It forms part of what you will be feeding yourself and your family with. So we know it's very important to make sure our risk is halal, right? We have an obligation to earn in a halal way. And that's as Mufti Faraz taught us and discussed in previous times, that to earn halal risk is a great form of ibadah, right? But then we have to make sure that whatever we are building up in terms of giving that income to us, whether it's our pension, whether it's our physical labor which we're getting paid for, or whatever it is, that is halal. And in terms of pensions, the key thing is where you're investing the money, as Mufti Faraz said. And this is where we have to be very, very careful. And in years gone by and times gone by, there has been very limited options for people. And people have been sort of, either you take a pension or you don't, because there's nothing halal to invest in. Alhamdulillah, things are changing. Workplaces are offering halal options. There are the private pension market where we come in is full of options where you can invest in a Sharia compliant way. But Mufti Faraz, you were trying to add anything to that in terms of the importance of having a halal pension?
Yeah, no, mashallah, what you said was spot on. And just to echo that further, I mean, think about it. The money, if it's unlawful, we're consuming unlawful income. And what's remember, anything that we do has an output. It has an outcome, right? Anything that we do, there's an input, there's an output. There is cause and effect. Allah tells us about that as well. Any good that we do, there's a positive effect. Any bad that we do, Allah forgive us, right? There's a negative effect, and Allah save us from our own evil, right? It's very important. We have to understand this. So deeds have consequences. Good deeds have good consequences. Bad actions and sins have negative consequences. Those consequences can be physical for your person and for your being, for your mind, for your soul, for your body, for your mental health. It can be for your family as well. Some sins, there's a hadith which show correlation between sin and what happens amongst the people. There's discord. So there are certain things which create dispute and discord between the husband and wife. Certain sins. There are certain sins which impact the environment. So Allah tells in the Quran that ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس, that corruption has become manifest in the lands and the seas because of the sins that people have perpetrated, right? So we have to understand when we do something wrong or some vice, and this is for me personally, I think first and foremost for myself as a reminder, that really what I'm doing, there's a negative consequence for that, and I have to ultimately bear it myself. But then, because there's people in proximity to me, they will also be exposed, and they can be exposed, right? So if I'm earning unlawful income, that's going to impact my ability to perform prayers properly. Because how can I gain light if I'm literally blocked all kind of like doorways to light, right, with this haram that I have within me, how will I feel the happiness to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We won't. It's very difficult because you're covered with so much. You're going to have to do something so mighty and strong to kind of break through that kind of thing. And of course, with Allah, don't think it's difficult. With Allah, just one tear and just one sajda, one kind of prostration changes the whole game, right? That's how Allah is. Allah is not like you and I, where we won't forgive somebody, right, if they do one thing wrong to us. Allah will give us a million chances, a billion chances, and continuously give us chances. So don't feel despondent by me saying this. Rather feel that Allah will always be there for us, and Allah is always there for us. But we need to really understand the harms of having unlawful income from a pension. So it'll impact our prayer, it'll impact us when our children, because it's impure for me, for your children it's impure also. It's not lawful for them to consume. This impure income is given to charitable avenues. But that remains impure for you and your family. It doesn't mean it's pure for your children and impure for you. So imagine our children who are the kind of like joy of our eyesight, right? And joy of our eyes, right? Our children that we see. We want the best for them. So we don't want to be feeding our children impure income. We don't want our spouse to be being nourished from impure income as well. So there are many spiritual effects, many physical effects as well of wrongdoing, and this is a much deeper topic which hopefully we'll elaborate in another session when it comes to the spiritual effects of not adopting Sharia compliance, which is a huge thing, and it's a reality. So we're not only doing it to be mechanically within a system or a process. Mechanics is there, yeah. We need to ensure we stay away from riba. We have a halal bank account and all these things. That's important. But why are we doing that? It's because of the relationship with Allah. That's the ultimate thing. There is an impact. Because we're so distant from that relationship, and we're so unmindful and we're so oblivious and negligent, it's like as if we're blind, right? We don't see the impact because we're just so accustomed to being distant. So if a person is far, how is he ever going to see any movement or anything happening? He won't, because he's so far away from what's actually happening. So brothers and sisters, I think this is an important kind of like message I would say to everybody is, we need to change. We need to really take action here. And alhamdulillah, Simply Ethical is there and other providers who are really trying to educate people when it comes to halal pensions. It's probably one thing I would say we want to leave this world. I want to, and I'm sure everyone wants to hear as well, leave this world in a way where our last morsel is halal, right? Our last morsel is halal. We don't want to go in the grave nourished with unlawful food or unlawful income. Nobody wants that. So Allah save us and Allah grant us guidance.
Okay. So we've got two questions here now. Is your pension still halal if you started working in a haram place then changed after? What do you need to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that even you can have a halal pension, meaning you can have a Sharia compliant pension, right, from a haram place. But this is more technical because you might be assuming that something is haram, right? But it might not be haram. It's depending. There's a lot of nuance there. So that question, I would say, send in an email because there's further questions. I wouldn't want to give you an answer and make you feel like you've done something right or wrong without knowing the details, right? So do email, send us an email, and inshallah I'll look into the question.
Okay, which asset classes qualify Sharia other than real estate?
Yeah, so you have, for example, equity. There's several Sharia compliant equity that's there. Property, as you mentioned, you can have direct property or indirect property. Direct property is when a fund invests directly in a brick and mortar, so they own property. Or you have indirect, where you invest in a company which is managing or hold properties, right? Indirect way. And there's sukuk. So the alternative of bonds is sukuk out there. There's several types of sukuk. These are Islamic bonds. I don't like the translation at all. They're like Islamic certificates, you could say, where you have a beneficial interest in Sharia compliant assets or Sharia compliant transactions. So sukuk is very common, and I'm sure Simply Ethical also have investments in sukuk through there.
Absolutely.
Then there is Sharia compliant savings accounts. So instead of having cash accounts, you have Sharia compliant saving accounts, which are doing either murabaha transactions or investing in the HPP assets of an Islamic bank. So that's also another. So these are like the four common, I would say. And there's precious metals as well, right? Like gold. where there's actual ownership of gold, silver, or other types of precious metals. So these, I would say, the 5 asset classes. You have equity, you have property, you have sukuk, then you have Sharia compliant savings accounts, and then you have precious metals. These are, I would say, the core 5 Sharia compliant asset classes found in Sharia compliant pensions.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there many fund managers managing Sharia funds?
Basically, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, there are, as time goes by, there are more and more Sharia compliant funds on the market. Globally, there is a vast range, probably over several hundred, 700, 800 plus. In the UK, Simply Ethical or any other provider in the UK trying to service the retail market or the common public, if you like, we have an obligation only to offer funds which are either approved or regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, which means, in essence, there's around 20 Sharia compliant collective investments in the market. So that is limiting us in that sense of what we can provide to the mass market. As Simply Ethical, we go for certain types of clients, generally those who have a little bit more to invest, because then it makes it worthwhile to invest individually in companies. We can invest individually in companies on the stock market, what we call direct equity investments. But we only recommend that for people probably in excess of sort of have a pot of investment of probably over £100,000, not because we want to exclude people, but because when you start investing in individual companies, to get the diversification that you want, you need to be able to spread those investments across a number of companies. And with very small amounts of money, it's very difficult to invest in a number of companies on a direct basis. So that's why if you have a significant amount of money, we can not only just invest in the funds or the collectives, but we can also start invest directly in companies and in equity. So we do offer that option as well. Yeah, I hope that helps. Okay. The second question is regarding zakat. Do you still have to pay if you don't have enough money, direct access? But regarding the amount of your pension, you should pay, which you can access in years to come, I suppose. I think this is this common question we had last time as well, with the defined contribution schemes. Do we have to pay zakat on them? The common concern being that obviously you might be 30 years of age, you can't get access to the pension to 55. So you don't have access to the money, but you might have a pot worth £100,000 and have to pay £1,000, £2,000 zakat. So you might not have that money readily available. But it's probably just worth answering that again, Mufti Faraz.
No, sure. So when it comes to this, right, our view of a number of scholars is that zakat is due on a defined contribution scheme, not a defined benefit scheme. In a defined contribution scheme, you have to see the underlying assets. What are they? And you'll pay zakat proportionately to the underlying asset classes. We've done a research at National Zakat Foundation on this, and you can Google this and you'll find the full research and a breakdown of this in more detail. But just because you don't have access in the interim is not sufficient to disqualify zakat payments, right? Because zakat rests upon investment and growth, right? It's not an asset class or an investment that you're barred to benefit from. You are benefiting from the growth of it, and that's the key thing from a zakat perspective.
Okay. Yeah, we discussed this again in quite a lot of detail in the last defined benefit lecture that Mufti Faraz gave, or the session he gave on that. Is that it in terms of the questions? Yeah, I think that's the questions we've had today. So thanks for everyone for your participation today. Hope you found that useful. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll see this video plus many others that we've done, and hopefully they're all designed to be beneficial to a audience in the UK with common questions people have, or to educate people on aspects of Sharia compliant financial planning, etc. So please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and our website has a lot of information as well. So thank you again for your attendance, and take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.